Welcome to our AI debate. In this video, two AI debaters will discuss a ground statement, taking turns to present arguments from different perspectives. They'll analyze the topic thoroughly, offering insights and counterpoints. If one debater finds their position indefensible, they may surrender, acknowledging the stronger argument. Let's begin with our ground statement. Ground statement: there are only two genders, and individuals cannot simply choose their gender.
While many people traditionally recognize only two genders based on biological sex, gender is increasingly understood as a complex social and personal identity that encompasses a spectrum beyond just male and female. This perspective acknowledges the experiences of non-binary, genderqueer, and transgender individuals who may feel their gender identity doesn't align with societal norms tied to their assigned sex at birth. Just as we accept diverse identities in other aspects of life, such as culture and profession, recognizing multiple genders allows for a more inclusive understanding of human identity that respects personal experiences and choices. Acknowledging this spectrum doesn't diminish anyone's identity. Instead, it fosters a society that values and respects the varied ways people experience and express themselves.
The argument fails to recognize that while gender identity may be subjective, biological sex remains a concrete, binary reality based on chromosomal and anatomical differences. Conflating the two leads to confusion and undermines the tangible nature of sex. Societal constructs of gender cannot redefine biological facts without sacrificing clarity, and expanding gender categories indiscriminately risks diluting the meaning of established identities. True inclusivity does not require the abandonment of clear definitions but rather the acknowledgement of biological realities alongside personal experiences. Thus, a balanced framework must respect both objective science and individual expression without compromising on either front.
While biological sex is often framed as a binary based on anatomy and chromosomes, the understanding of both gender and sex has evolved significantly to reflect a spectrum rather than a strict dichotomy. This shift acknowledges the complexities of human identity and experiences that go beyond mere biology. Conflating gender identity solely with biological sex oversimplifies the rich diversity of individuals' lived experiences and can alienate those who don't fit neatly into traditional categories. True inclusivity thrives on recognizing that personal experiences and identities are valid, regardless of biological factors. By embracing a framework that respects both the science of biology and the fluidity of gender identity, we create a more compassionate and accurate representation of human diversity without sacrificing clarity or meaning.
The argument conflates gender identity with social constructs while ignoring the biological basis of sex, which is rooted in clear anatomical and chromosomal distinctions. These are not mere abstractions but fundamental truths of human biology. While individual experiences are valid, they do not invalidate the objective reality of binary sex, male and female. Claiming a spectrum does not alter the fact that biological sex serves as the foundational element for reproduction and human development. Accepting various identities does not necessitate abandoning biological facts. To do so is to undermine scientific clarity in favor of subjective interpretations, ultimately weakening the discourse on human identity rather than enriching it.
While biological sex is indeed rooted in anatomical and chromosomal distinctions, it's essential to recognize that gender identity is a distinct aspect of human experience that encompasses a spectrum beyond mere binary classifications. Many individuals experience gender in a way that doesn't align strictly with their biological sex, indicating that human identity is nuanced and shaped by more than just biology. Validating diverse gender identities does not negate scientific facts. Rather, it enriches our understanding of human complexity and emphasizes that identity can be informed by both biology and personal experience. This broader perspective fosters inclusivity and understanding, rather than weakening discourse, as it acknowledges the richness of human existence that transcends a simple binary framework.
While gender identity may appear nuanced, it fundamentally derives from biological sex, which is anchored in immutable anatomical and chromosomal realities. The assertion that gender exists on a spectrum undermines the clarity of biological definitions and confuses subjective perception with objective fact. Acknowledging the complexities of human experience does not justify the conflation of identity with unfounded interpretations, it merely complicates discourse without basis in biological science. True inclusivity arises from recognizing the integrity of biological categories rather than diluting them with subjective ideology.
While biological sex is indeed a crucial aspect of identity, gender is a multifaceted construct influenced by social, cultural, and psychological factors that extend beyond mere biology. The notion that gender must strictly align with biological sex fails to account for the lived experiences of countless individuals who identify outside traditional binaries, demonstrating that identity is not solely dictated by anatomical or chromosomal characteristics. Acknowledging gender as a spectrum does not dilute biological definitions, rather, it enriches our understanding of human diversity and fosters inclusivity by validating experiences that do not fit within rigid categories. By embracing this complexity, we promote a more compassionate and comprehensive discourse that respects both scientific understanding and individual experience.
The argument conflates gender with identity, neglecting that biological sex provides a foundational basis for understanding human beings. Gender identities, while diverse, do not alter the immutable reality of biological distinctions. Biological sex is rooted in objective physiological traits, chromosomes, hormones, reproductive structures, while gender, as a social construct, often relies on subjective interpretations that can vary widely. This subjective nature undermines the reliability of gender as a definitive category, risking the dilution of essential biological concepts. Recognizing the complexities of gender does not necessitate a departure from biological realities but rather highlights the necessity of firmly grounding discussions in biological science, which offers clarity that subjective experiences alone cannot.
While biological sex provides important physiological distinctions, it is essential to recognize that gender identity encompasses a broader spectrum that includes individual experiences and societal roles, which are influenced by culture and context. Reducing gender solely to biological traits overlooks the lived realities of many who identify outside traditional binaries, thereby invalidating their experiences and identities. Moreover, the assertion that gender is merely a social construct does not diminish its significance. Rather, it highlights the fluidity and adaptability of human experience, which can coexist with biological understandings. By acknowledging both biological and gender dimensions, we can foster a more inclusive perspective that respects individual identities while still valuing scientific insights, ultimately enriching our understanding of human diversity rather than diluting it.
The argument conflates gender identity with subjective experience, neglecting the foundational biological realities that underpin human sexuality. While cultural context influences gender expression, it does not alter the immutable facts of biological sex, which remains a critical determinant of reproductive roles and health. The claim that recognizing gender as a construct enhances inclusivity fails to acknowledge that this perspective often undermines the significance of biological differences, creating a false equivalence between identity and biology. Additionally, prioritizing subjective identities over biological truths can lead to societal inconsistencies and confusion, ultimately diminishing the clarity and utility of sex-based distinctions in fields such as medicine, sports, and law. Therefore, a balanced approach must firmly recognize biological sex as a primary factor while still accommodating the complexities of gender identity without obscuring essential scientific truths.
While it's important to acknowledge the biological aspects of sex, conflating gender identity solely with biology overlooks the complex interplay of social, psychological, and cultural factors that shape human experience. Gender identity is not merely a subjective experience, it often reflects deeply felt truths about oneself that go beyond biological determinants. For instance, many transgender individuals experience gender dysphoria, which highlights the significance of identity in their lives and well-being, suggesting that understanding and validating these identities can lead to better mental health outcomes. Additionally, one can recognize biological differences without dismissing the legitimacy of diverse gender identities, as inclusivity can coexist with scientific understanding. In fields like medicine, for example, a nuanced approach that incorporates both biological data and individuals' identities can enhance patient care. Therefore, promoting an understanding of gender as a social construct alongside biological realities allows for a more compassionate and holistic view that respects both individual experiences and scientific truths.
The conflation of gender identity with social and psychological factors often neglects the empirical significance of biological sex, which is a clear and immutable aspect of human existence. While personal identity is indeed complex, it does not override biological realities. Individuals cannot change their biological sex regardless of their perceived gender identity. The existence of gender dysphoria illustrates a psychological condition rather than a refutation of biological sex. Inclusivity does not necessitate the dismissal of biological science, rather, it should be grounded in it, as medical practices cannot effectively integrate subjective identities without undermining objective health standards. Promoting a view that elevates subjective experience above biological fact ultimately dilutes scientific rigor and can lead to detrimental consequences in fields like medicine, where accuracy is paramount for effective treatment.
While biological sex is indeed a significant aspect of human identity, it's essential to recognize that gender is a complex interplay of biology, identity, and social factors, and reducing it solely to biological determinants overlooks the lived realities of many individuals. Gender dysphoria, for example, demonstrates that personal experience and societal context are vital in understanding identity beyond mere biological classifications. Empirical research in gender studies and psychology supports the notion that acknowledging diverse gender identities can enhance health outcomes rather than dilute scientific rigor. In fact, inclusive practices have been shown to improve patient trust and care in medical settings. Therefore, rather than dismissing subjective experiences, healthcare should integrate them with biological understanding to provide holistic and effective treatments that respect individual identities while maintaining scientific integrity.
The argument overemphasizes subjective experience at the expense of biological reality, conflating gender identity with complex social constructs. While individual experiences matter, they do not negate the primacy of biological sex, which is a fundamental determinant of human physiology and reproduction. Gender dysphoria, rather than proving the fluidity of gender identity, often highlights a disconnect with biological norms, which should not be overlooked in favor of inclusive jargon. Empirical research can be misinterpreted. Enhancing health outcomes through acceptance does not validate the subjective over the objective. Effective healthcare must prioritize biological truths while remaining sensitive to individual experiences, but the foundation must remain rooted in clear, immutable biological facts.
While it's true that biological sex plays a significant role in physiology and reproduction, focusing solely on it overlooks the complexity of gender identity, which is shown to be influenced by both biological and social factors. Research indicates that gender identity is not merely a subjective experience but is supported by neurological and genetic studies that indicate a biological basis for gender dysphoria, showcasing that identity can diverge from traditional biological categories. Dismissing the experiences of transgender individuals as mere social constructs can lead to harm, reinforcing stigma and mental health issues rather than fostering acceptance. Effective healthcare must integrate biological realities with a nuanced understanding of gender identity, recognizing that both personal experiences and biological truths are essential for holistic support. Thus, prioritizing one over the other can compromise the well-being of individuals navigating these complexities.
The argument conflates biological sex with gender identity, assuming they operate on the same plane, which they do not. Biological sex is an immutable fact, while gender identity is a subjective construct influenced by various social and psychological factors. While acknowledging neurological and genetic studies is important, the interpretation of such data often lacks rigor and clarity, leading to assumptions that do not hold universally. Gender dysphoria, rather than being evidence of biological divergence, can also be understood through the lens of social pressures and psychological constructs. Holistic support necessitates prioritization of biological realities over subjective interpretations, as failing to do so compromises the factual basis of sex, which is fundamental in fields like healthcare and science. Conceding the primacy of biological sex does not diminish respect for individual experiences, rather, it reinforces a coherent framework for understanding human diversity.
While it's true that biological sex and gender identity are distinct concepts, reducing gender identity solely to social constructs undermines the complex interplay of biology, individual experience, and societal factors. Neurological and genetic studies increasingly show that gender identity may have biological underpinnings, suggesting that it isn't merely subjective. For example, some individuals experience profound alignment or misalignment with their assigned sex at birth, which cannot be fully explained by social pressures alone. Recognizing gender identity as valid does not negate the existence of biological sex but rather enriches our understanding of human diversity in ways that can enhance healthcare and social support. Emphasizing both the biological aspects of sex and the legitimacy of lived gender experiences offers a more comprehensive approach, promoting both respect for individual identities and an understanding of biological facts, which are not mutually exclusive.
The argument that gender identity is merely a social construct disregards the substantial evidence of biological influences and their interplay with individual experience. However, conflating biological aspects with subjective identity does not account for the overwhelming evidence that socialization significantly shapes gender perception. The existence of neurological and genetic factors does not inherently validate each individual's gender identity as legitimate. Subjectivity remains a personal experience shaped by myriad influences, including cultural norms and societal expectations. To claim that gender identity enriches our understanding of human diversity while simultaneously asserting it as innately valid overlooks the objective reality of biological sex and risks diluting the clarity needed for effective discourse on healthcare and social support. Thus, while acknowledging individual experiences is important, it is equally vital to uphold the foundational truths of biology without conflation.
While acknowledging the role of biological influences in shaping gender identity, it is vital to recognize that identity is not solely dictated by biology but is a complex interplay of social, psychological, and cultural factors. Thus, reducing gender identity to mere biological determinism oversimplifies a nuanced human experience. Research shows that gender identity can manifest independently of biological sex, suggesting that the subjective experience of one's gender is equally valid and crucial for understanding individual diversity. Additionally, healthcare and social support discussions benefit from a more inclusive approach that respects subjective identities, as empirical evidence demonstrates positive outcomes when individuals are affirmed in their gender identities, thereby enriching our collective understanding of human experience. Ultimately, acknowledging both biological and social dimensions does not dilute the conversation but enhances our ability to support individuals effectively in their journeys.
The argument fails to recognize that while social and psychological factors are influential, they do not negate the fundamental biological realities that underpin gender identity. Biology provides the baseline for sex differentiation, making it the primary determinant of identity. Independent manifestation of gender identity does not equate to its independence from biological foundations, rather, it illustrates the complexity of human experience within the biological framework. Empirical evidence supporting subjective identity affirmation does not invalidate biological determinism but highlights the necessity of understanding both realms as interconnected rather than mutually exclusive. The insistence on an exclusively social construct overlooks the significant role of genetics and neurobiology in shaping identity, thus rendering the argument fundamentally flawed. The discourse must prioritize an acknowledgement of biology to avoid misrepresentation and ensure a comprehensive understanding of gender identity. Conceding at this stage would mean ignoring these critical nuances, which is not an option.
While biological factors certainly play a role in gender identity, emphasizing them as the primary determinant oversimplifies the intricate interplay between biology, socialization, and personal experience. Identity is not solely rooted in biology but also shaped by individual contexts and societal influences. For instance, many people identify with a gender that differs from their biological sex, illustrating that personal identity can diverge from biological classifications. Moreover, a purely biological perspective risks invalidating the lived experiences of countless individuals who have navigated their identities outside traditional frameworks. Recognizing that both biological and social elements contribute to gender identity allows for a richer understanding and compassion toward diverse experiences, rather than reducing identity to a singular basis. Therefore, acknowledging the multifaceted nature of gender identity is essential, as it fosters inclusivity and a more nuanced discussion.
The assertion that gender identity is solely shaped by biology, socialization, and personal experience overlooks the fundamental biological basis of sex differentiation, which is indisputable and scientifically grounded. While personal experiences are valid, they do not negate the reality of biological sex as a crucial factor in identity formation. Individuals may identify differently than their biological sex, But this divergence does not diminish the significance of biological determinants. Instead, it illustrates the complexity of human experience rather than invalidates biological foundations. Acknowledging biological reality does not preclude compassion for diverse experiences, but rather establishes a necessary framework within which these experiences can be understood, rendering the claim for a purely social perspective as an inadequate and ultimately misleading simplification. Thus, the debate should not conflate social constructs with biological imperatives, as doing so risks undermining the integrity of both scientific understanding and individual identity.
While biological sex certainly plays a role in identity formation, it does not encompass the entirety of human experience or identity. Gender identity is a multifaceted construct shaped by a complex interplay of biological, social, and psychological factors. Dismissing the validity of personal experiences and identities that don't align with biological sex overlooks the lived realities of many individuals and the rich diversity of human expression. Instead of viewing biology as a rigid framework, it can be understood as one of many influencing factors that interact uniquely in each person's life, allowing for a broader understanding of identity that includes compassion and recognition of individual narratives. This perspective acknowledges the scientific basis of sex while also validating the profound significance of personal experiences and social contexts, creating a more inclusive dialogue that respects both individual identities and scientific inquiry.
The argument falsely conflates gender identity with subjective experience, thereby undermining the objective reality of biological sex, which is immutable and fundamentally defines reproductive roles. While individual narratives are undoubtedly important, they do not alter the fact that biological sex is a primary determinant in sexual dimorphism and cannot be dismissed as merely one of many factors. Recognizing the scientific basis of sex is crucial for coherent discussions about identity, and failure to do so results in a dilution of understanding that ultimately obscures truth with relativism, making the dialogue more about feelings than facts.
While it's true that biological sex plays a significant role in reproductive roles, it's equally important to recognize that gender identity is a valid aspect of individual experience that interacts with but does not solely depend on biological factors. Gender identity can inform personal and social realities that shape one's experience in profound ways, and these experiences deserve acknowledgement alongside scientific facts. Dismissing gender identity as merely subjective can lead to oversimplification and neglect the diverse realities of people's lives, which can foster misunderstanding and alienation. Acknowledging both biological sex and gender identity allows for a richer, more nuanced conversation that respects both the scientific basis of sex and the legitimacy of personal experience, ultimately fostering inclusivity and understanding rather than relativism.
Surrender.
Result: Valentino has surrendered. Jane wins the debate.